Dankjewel. So let's go into a little bit about the intersection of isolation and the nature of ADHD. First of all, and I wish I knew that person's name because I could address him or her directly, but that's okay. ADHD, if we look at the brains of people with ADHD, we find some trends, and there are differences in the size of certain regions. There are differences in the way that the brain is structured, the way it functions, as well as neurochemistry. So the way that our brains metabolize and process neurochemicals is different. One of the biggies is dopamine. It's about dopamine, which disappears from the scene. The stimulants, they make it reappear again. That's a song I wrote. You can come another time and hear the whole thing.
Yeah,
but
right.
We have brains that are different. There's no doubt about that. It's not a supposition. And I want to recognize Marco Ferrick, who is in Vietnam right now. We have somebody in Vietnam watching. That's a wonderful thing.
Wonderful.
So how does this impact isolation?
Sorry.
Well, I didn't say volgende alstublieft, but that's okay.
Excuse me. I pushed the wrong button. Sorry.
I just wanted to say volgende alstublieft so I can keep getting that in. I like saying that.
Yeah, sure.
So let's examine some of the impacts. And by the way, Marco Ferrick, who's the vice president of ADHD Europe, he's in Vietnam right now. And with the intensity of this situation and with the novelty, novelty meaning a new supply of stimulation. Marco Ferrick has been reporting to me that he's actually doing well. He actually feels like he's getting lots of ideas, that he is productive, that he is out doing things. He's not experiencing any mental funks or mental fogs. So some people with ADHD actually can do well, and we're going to talk about one of those later on. But let's talk about some of the diagnostic features of ADHD, especially the ones that can be particularly troublesome. A lot of us can be restless. So we want to do something. We have this inner physical sense of just not being satisfied with where we're at, and we want to go do something. We can be impulsive. So I've been dealing with some of my young adult clients, and they have been having impulsive thoughts, and some of them have done impulsive things. Like I have one 21-year-old who was, shall we say, engaging in some romantic liaisons that were against the order here. So impulsivity can be a problem. Now, those are more for what we would call the hyperactive impulsive ADHDers. But let's go to that third one, emotional regulation. We talked about how the brain of ADHD people is different. And the parts of the brain that are involved with our ability to regulate our emotions, that is often impaired in ADHDers. So we can get into funks. We can slide into depression. We can go off on manic tangents. So a lot of us, whether you're hyperactive impulsive or primarily inattentive type ADHD, most of us are having a problem with emotional regulation. I'm going to tell you right now, I have everyday funks that I'm dealing with. I mean, every day there is a distinct low that I'm struggling with. And the only way I've been personally able to deal with it is through meditation. And I have to reach out. So it's the importance of getting support. So the worst thing that you can do, whether you're a hyperactive, impulsive ADHDer like me, or perhaps you're more of a hyperactive dreamer like our beloved Marco Ferrick, we've got to find ways of, first of all, honoring and owning that we're really struggling with emotional regulation, and then engaging in some decisions, some choices to deal with that. My choices are meditation and reaching out to people by phone and by video. So for example, one of the people that I regularly touch base with is Andrea Bilbo, and she's watching here, and she and I had a call this morning, and we've talked most days. And those phone calls have been very helpful for me. So I want you to realize that reaching out and getting support and finding support are crucial. And I'm just going to run through the last ones of these pretty quickly because we're going to get to some questions here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I can sense Hans is getting a little restless, which would be consistent with ADHD. We got to love him for that.
Yeah. And some questions already came up, but please proceed, and then I will.
Yeah, let me just get to this slide.
Yeah. Sure.
So, lack of external signaling cues. We don't have the external structures that we used to, and so we're kind of on our own. And you know, I normally run groups during the day, and I structure my day around the groups that I run with people, you know, who actually come to my place of business, and I haven't had that. And so even though I have a lot more time, without that external structure, I'm struggling with productivity. And of course, my way of dealing with that is I have to talk to people. I have to reach out for support. I have to make lists. I have a whole bunch of things that I do. But you know what? I'm not successful every day. There are some days when I'm really not productive. One of the things that Marco Farrick and I have talked about is how even the inattentive among us, the inattentive and the hyperactive impulsive, we need novel stimulation. So the trouble is, you know, we're all staying in our houses. We're staying close to home. We're just not getting that novel stimulation. So that brings me to probably the big topic that we're all dealing with, and that's ADHD and the brain's negativity bias. So if you look at that diagram in the lower right, no ADHD, and the red represents areas of high cerebral metabolic activity. So this is what is happening when we give somebody a boring or mundane task to do, like ordering blocks or different tasks that they give on psychometric testing. So the left with no ADHD, that's what a person's brain looks like when they don't have ADHD. And when the ADHDer puts him or herself to a boring or repetitive or mundane task, this is essentially what his or her brain looks like. But here's the thing. ADHDers will often use negativity unconsciously to increase the activity in the brain. And what that line means, ADHD and the brain's negativity bias, is that we know from thousands of studies on the brain that the brain is actually more highly active when it's being negative about something, when it's experiencing negative emotions like anger, than it is when it's experiencing positive emotions. So what happens with ADHD people is we get hooked on negativity. And we're going to talk about that in just a second on the next slide. And that may be something that a lot of you are finding. If you're like me, you may be finding yourself getting and staying negative and having negative thoughts. One of the terms that we often hear is ANT, A-N-T, automatic negative thoughts. We get hooked on automatic negative thoughts, and we do a whole lot of things to really unconsciously increase the activity of the brain. Now, before we go to questions, I just want to say that if you have children or you don't have children, the dynamics can be somewhat different. You know, you may be a parent with ADHD who's dealing with a child with ADHD, and so you're trying to deal with your own executive function deficits, and then you're trying to help your child with those. Boy, that can be particularly trying.
Sure.
So Hans, if we could, we're
let's
running
go
a little bit behind. Let's go to some questions.
Yeah, right. First of all, you were talking in your last sentence about negative thoughts. As a coach, how do you intervene, or what do you teach people about their negative self-image connected to these negative thoughts? Do you work on that, or do you give them? How do you handle that as a coach? What's your approach for that?
Well, it's a very difficult area to work in,
Sure.
evidently. So I think the first step is the first step when dealing with a lot of troubling behaviors. We have to become aware of the thoughts first.
Yeah.
Because so often those negative thoughts are we're so plugged into them. We're so tied into them that we just take that as our normal reality, and we don't even realize what's going on. So the first step is we have to become conscious of those negative thoughts.
Yeah.
And so it's a process. It takes time. I mean, if there's somebody out there, Hans, right now watching who has those kind of negative thoughts, just having me talk about them is not going to make them go away.
No.
So what we have to do is we have to first be aware of it. And what's the nature of it? Is it me beating up on myself? Oh, Kevin, you're dumb. How could you do that again? You just can't do. Is it a negative self-talk thing? Am I beating up on myself? Or is it a tendency to be negative toward other people? Am I always noticing the negative? Am I always complaining?
Yeah.
How does it show up? So that, Hans, I think that's a wonderful question. And it takes great courage to peel back those layers. So that's the first step. One of the things that I do with a lot of my clients, and believe it or not, I do it with teenagers, I use meditation.
Oh, great.
Because meditation, and when I say meditation, I don't mean I'm sitting on a cushion going, you can do that if you want. That can be fun. But I mean, I am teaching people how to follow their breath as an object of contemplation, almost to distract the mind. And then they notice what thoughts are coming up. And so one of the things that I do is I call it one-on-one meditation. And I have people, when we're meditating, they actually tell me their negative thoughts. So I have them meditate, focus on their breath, and then when the negative thoughts come, I have them share them. And that's a wonderful way to externalize. So if you have people out there, I have said from the very first of this presentation that support during this time is crucial. Yeah. Whether or not you're reaching out, and if maybe you're in a Facebook parent group, maybe you have some friends, but you have to find some people who are safe for you to share those things with and put them out.
Absolutely.
It's a process.
Yeah.
And, even if somebody's working with you or they're working with me, that's wonderful. But you got to have more than just a professional like you or me. You got to have a whole network.
A network, a social network is very important. Sure. Well, let me read some questions to you, because it's nice that both the side that the lockdown didn't work that negative, and the side of troubles is I see in the question. The first one: I am one of those people who perform better under pressure. ADHD. I did great in this isolation. So my question is how to keep that energy when we go back to normal. So that's the other way around.
I love it.
I love the isolation, but what can I do when we go back to normal with all the distraction, etc.? So you understand, this is someone who felt the crisis and isolation as a pressure to perform, and that's understandable with a certain kind of ADHD. And what will happen when we go back to normal? Help.
Well, Andrea, Marco, Jerry Mills, Jerry Mills is an American guy, plays the guitar, wonderful fellow. We have taken many trips together on the road doing ADHD talks throughout the UK. And one of the things that we all agree on is that when the four of us are together on those road trips, we feel like we're functioning at 100%. We're full of ideas. Not only are we full of ideas, but we write things down and we implement things, and we follow through in ways that in our lives may elude us. And so that's a very interesting question. So one of the things that I hate to come back and you know, maybe seem like I'm striking the same chord, but it does come back to getting that support network and having different sounding boards so that when I'm not productive, first of all, this person who shared, the great gift of right now is that he or she knows that he or she has that productivity inside. And it's real important to anchor that sense deep inside. And so when you don't have that productivity, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that you need to do something differently. And I don't know. Do you need to have a phone call with a friend every morning and monitor your progress? Do you need a phone buddy? Do you need a coach so that you have a weekly accountability with your coach? Do you need to be part of a Facebook group where you are dialoguing and checking in every morning?
Yeah, right.
I don't know. But I know that what you need to do now is strongly anchor that experience of how good you feel being productive and realize that you can repeat it.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk later about a guy who was a lot like you and who wasn't able to repeat it because he didn't have the requisite support network and circumstances in place.
Sure.
That's a wonderful question.
Yeah, sure. And for those who came in late, please put your questions in the Q&A, under the Q&A button, and not in the chat. I can't read 3 things at one time, so please put it in the Q&A. And indeed, this webinar will be recorded, and we will make an extract of it for our YouTube channel. And here's the next question. My teenage son has ADHD symptoms. His ADHD symptoms have worsened in the lockdown. Do you see this as a trend in lockdown, that ADHD symptoms worsen? Do you have any tips, recommendations to get him motivated and focused again? This is the essence of what we are talking about, Kevin.
So let's go to, you know what, that's really, whoever asked that question is psychic, because that's my next slide. So, volgende alstublieft.
Volgende. Hier is de volgende. Right.
So, a lot of people, right, you know, by the way, The World is Falling Apart is the chapter 3 of my book, Movers, Dreamers, and Risk Takers, Unlocking the Power of ADHD, which contains a lot of ideas that are particularly poignant right now. So let's talk about that. First of all, yeah, a lot of people are seeing their ADHD symptoms worsen. I have my 23-year-old nephew who lives with me, and he has really worsened. Now he's back to work, so things are a lot better. But this comes back to, for some of us, it can come back to what I call games ADHD people play, which is, they're all rooted in an unconscious seeking of negativity. So what my nephew does is he plays a game called Let's Have an Argument. Now, he doesn't think to himself, oh, I feel like we need to play Let's Have an Argument. But that's in fact what he does. So he will make controversial statements. He will question things that I've done. And it's all designed to get me to erupt. It's all designed to get me to react. So a variant of that game is, hey, I bet I can get you to yell at me. So again, his attempt is really to bring a greater amount of stimulation and excitement into his world, because he doesn't have a lot of excitement in his world. So one of the things that I do, now let me tell you this, when I'm at my best, because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. There are times when I blow my stack with him. It's a very American expression. I blow my stack. I erupt in anger. And I hate myself when I do that, but I'm only human. And he is an excellent player of let's have an argument. I mean, I put him up against the best at let's have an argument. So the first thing to do is I have to name the behavior. And so when I'm at my best, I will say, oh, you're trying to play let's have an argument. I'm not interested in having an argument. Is there something else that you'd like to do? Now, I happen to have a large yard, or as they say in the UK, a large garden, and he will often, do heavy duty jobs in my garden, and allow me to redirect him. He also will do jobs around my house. So we have to find things for him to do, because sitting and playing tiddlywinks or watching YouTube videos over and over again just isn't going to work for him. So another troublesome negative that we're seeing is we're going back to emotional regulation. So absent the structures, absent the activities that the individual finds satisfying and worthwhile, we're finding a lot of anxiety. We're finding a lot of depression. We're finding homes with a lot of anger and a lot of feelings of helplessness. So the question is, how do we deal with that? Well, I think that one of the things that we need to do, and my first response to this person who asked the question about his or her son, it's important to use this opportunity to have a dialogue.
Yeah, sure.
Because one of the problems is, with Mitchell, there's a part of him that would love for me to erupt and create negativity because he has unconsciously become dependent on negativity. And so there's some sort of a payoff in that for him. And he's not thinking, boy, I'm bored. I'm going to make Uncle Kevin really mad at me. And that will increase the cerebral activity in my brain. And I will feel overall a greater sense of satisfaction and engagement with life. He's not thinking that. It's not a conscious process, but yet that's exactly what he's doing. It's unconscious.
You're mentioning a word there, boredom. That's one of the things I thought with this question, that it doesn't have to be, but it's possible that for the child or even for an adult who is seeking an argument, that boredom is behind it. Let's say the low neurotransmitters in the brain, and then an argument and some excitement helps to sort of wake up again. And I think if people realize just that it's not mentioned for you, it's not meant for you, this argument. They may be angry at you, but it's their own chemistry. Do you share that?
That is an excellent point, Hans, that if we can sort of see and become aware that this is not personal, it's not really directed at me, but it is about, let's just take Mitchell. It's about Mitchell's need to allay, to palliate his boredom and increase overall cerebral activity. Yeah. If we understand that and we don't take it personally, then we can actually have a discussion.
Yeah.
Now,
of course.
one of the other things that I do with him is I say, okay, you're playing let's have an argument. All right, let's go ahead and have an argument. And so then for fun, then it's fun. Then we have an argument and it's fun. And I know that I'm not really getting hooked into it. I'm just playing argument for having fun. He doesn't really like that.
No.
You see? But it helps to make him more conscious. Yeah. And that's, I think, ultimately what we're trying to do. And so this lady who's talking, or I don't know if it's a lady, but this parent.
It's anonymous. It's anonymous. But do you?
Okay, this anonymous. So we could call it a gender-free person. But the thing about it is, we can't change the circumstances, but we can use the circumstances to engage in dialogue.
Yeah. This dialogue thing, Kevin, do you use or maybe it is something the people who are listening can read afterwards. The nonviolent communication method, like
well, give us a, go into that a little bit. Give us a few of those steps as your system.
No, it's not my system. I think if you Google on nonviolent communication, it's just what you say that you do, like changing the background of the intention of the argument, or and one of the things I've learned from nonviolent communication is to wait till someone is calmed down to evaluate the situation. It's a Dutch expression. Don't handle the iron when an iron is in the fire. When you manipulate.
Don't touch the iron when it's in the fire.
Yeah, don't touch the iron when it's in the fire. So that's a great. Is it real English? Is what you say, or just you made it up?
No, you could say that. Don't touch the iron when it's in the fire. It's not a legit idiomatic
but
expression.
I think everybody understands when the heat of the argument, just wait a while, let it cool down, and then say, hey. So that's maybe a tip for people who want to really. This argument thing is in a lot of families, big, huge problem in ADHD families.
Right, and the problem is that when we intensify, when we exacerbate an argument, we tend to bypass. There's a cerebral circuit that tends to bypass the rational part of the brain. And once we get into that strong intensity of an argument, we notice, especially with ADHDers, that the part of the brain that's involved with emotional regulation works less well. The metabolism of dopamine in that part of the brain actually goes down. And so you're really fighting a losing battle, because you're getting into, sort of, maybe a simplistic way of thinking about it. You're dealing with somebody whose reptilian brain is quite activated.
Yeah, sure.
But that's a great point. Google nonviolent communication, and that's another overlay to what I'm talking about. And I think that's really wonderful. So if you guys at home could write that down, nonviolent communication. This is a great opportunity. This time period, this is a great opportunity to practice that stuff. Yeah. Because probably for most of us, things are going to get better once this crisis passes. But, I always like to come back to Chinese, and their word for crisis is 2 characters. Danger is 1 character, and opportunity is another one of the characters. Yeah. So let's think about that. Let's maybe train our minds a little bit on what the opportunity is. Yeah. And I think that for all of us, it is an opportunity, especially for the parents, to engage in nonviolent communication and practice a new way of handling negativity. And by the way, there is some research on this idea of changing the negative dynamics in families that are dealing with ADHD. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks. If you as a parent are going to stop getting plugged in and stop getting trapped into those negative dynamics, if you unplug and deal with them in a different way, what happens is the ADHD person is unconsciously dependent on those negative dynamics. There's a cerebral dependency that takes hold. And so if you unplug, your loved one may increase the intensity of the negativity to try to hook you. So be aware of that. Yeah. You'll know you'll know your efforts are working if it seems for a time to get worse. That's the counterintuitive principle that scientific research suggests will be at work. So if you start unplugging from the negativity, if you stop getting hooked into it, and your loved one increases his or her attempts to hook you, then you know you're doing the right thing.
Sure. Great.
So even though it will be unpleasant, you can say, it's working. He's getting harder to deal with.
Yeah, right. Here are 2 questions about negative thoughts. one referring back to the slide before, how can negative thoughts explain a low cortical activity in your slide number 2? And the other one, negative thoughts and mind wandering. Being an ADHD woman who has emotional dysregulation, how would Kevin advise that? So 2 things about negative thoughts and the brain part of it, and the emotional dysregulation, and how would you advise about that?
Okay, well, for number one, the negative thoughts, I mean, it's a very broad topic. And in fact, we could do a series of 10 webinars on negative thoughts and still have material left to cover.
Sure.
So I'll give you a couple underlying factors. First of all, ADHD people, we suffer from an underactive brain when situations are repetitive, low intensity, quote unquote, boring and mundane. So if you give a neurotypical person a very boring or repetitive task to do, and you give an ADHD person the same task, and you examine their brains, you will see that the ADHD person's brain is not as activated. That ADHD person may have a higher IQ than the neurotypical person, but the ADHD person's brain will be underactive because those tasks are not stimulating enough to rouse the brain. So that means that ADHD people, we often start from a place of lower overall brain activity. Okay? So if you take that reality into account, it just so happens that one way, sure, it's a surefire way to activate the brain, to get the brain to be more activated, is if we're being negative. So if we're complaining, the activity in the brain goes up. If we're angry, the activity in the brain goes up. If we're dissatisfied, the activity in the brain goes up. And so what happens is we don't say to ourselves, okay, my brain is underactive, I'm going to have to use negative emotions to increase the activity. But that's exactly what happens, okay? So over time, we experience this, and when the brain is more activated at a very deep level, we feel more satisfied. We all want to feel fully satisfied. We all want to feel fully engaged. So ADHD people, when we're being negative, we feel more fully engaged, and every human being wants to feel fully engaged and fully plugged into life. Now, that's one current in the stream. Another current in the stream is that we often have, well, there's actually 3. This is the second one. We all, those of us with ADHD, we all get negative information about ourselves. So the school system, perhaps our relationships with our families, these cause our self-esteem to suffer. Okay, so by the time somebody's 25, an ADHD person, our brains may have caught up in 2/3 of the cases with the neurotypical person, but our self-esteem, if we measure the self-esteem of people when they're 25 years old, those who have ADHD, we have a lower sense of self-esteem, and that's a very difficult thing to increase. And that's where one of the things that we have to work on. We have to work on how we feel about ourselves and how we talk to ourselves, what our dialogue is.
Do you think that emotional dysregulation this woman is talking about is connected with this, or are there other aspects or things you can handle about it or do about it or whatever?
There's a third. Let me do the third current, the third current in the stream. Yeah. And the third current is that there are aspects of ADHD involved in the way that our brains process serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. The way that our brains process these neurotransmitters is atypical. So ADHD people, we are more neurochemically predisposed to mood issues. So our brains will often not process serotonin in a typical way, norepinephrine in a typical way, dopamine in a typical way. So we have neurochemical issues. It's not so much a neurochemical imbalance as it is an atypical neurochemical processing. For example, with the dopamine, our brains tend to gobble up all the dopamine too quickly, so there's not enough to stay in the synapse, the nerve junction, and so our brains function atypically. So the reason I mentioned that third current in the stream, Hans, is because medications will help these things. So the stimulant medications help slow down the processing of dopamine as well as norepinephrine. And then some medications like Strattera, I don't know what you guys, atomoxetine, I don't know what you guys call it in Europe, but we call it Strattera. Atomoxetine is
Strattera, that's a European word also.
Scientific name. That is a norepinephrine specific, and some people with ADHD, it's not as much of a dopamine issue, it's a norepinephrine issue. And then a lot of us will benefit from specific serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and there's a whole lot of these out there, and there's other antidepressants too. But so when you're ADHD, there is definitely a mood component to that. And so, but I think in all of us, I think we definitely have most of us have that negativity bias, number one. Number two, most of us will have that self-esteem piece that we have to work on. And number three, there are likely to be some cerebral factors in the way that our brain is neurochemically functioning. And so that's why medications can play an important role in the whole process. So it's important to think of all three, because if low self-esteem is your issue and you work on that, you may still have a neurochemical issue that needs to be addressed. So
it's two things.
Yeah, we can't, what's that?
Two things. Not only one thing, it's both.
Well, three.
Yeah, three. Okay.
Negativity bias, which is self-esteem, and the neurochemical.
The chemistry,
you know, and you may have a friend who doesn't really need medication. That's okay. That doesn't mean that you're not going to benefit from medication. It's important to be open to the whole panoply.
Sorry to interrupt you. Here is, because this is really about isolation. This, I don't know, mother or father talking about the child with ADD. And here is the lack of structure. You know, school can be a burden for ADHD or ADD, but it's also a good external structure. And this parent is saying, without school, his symptoms of inattention are getting worse. He's all day daydreaming. How to activate him, that's one, and how to structure his day. So do you have any tips for structuring? I recognize it by all means, because the first thing I had to do when I quit my office and had to work from home in the Netherlands, the first thing after a week I realized I need to make a new structure, because otherwise I will sort of die, you know, will die in chaos. So I recognize it. So it's an important question, I think.
Well, let's go to the next slide, and let's discuss it in terms of the next slide.
Yeah, here it is.
So the question is, are you a Hans or a Kevin?
Yeah, sure.
So Hans was just talking about, you know, about forming a new structure. Now we're sort of running low on time, so I'm going to speed through this a little bit. But first of all, with all ADHDers, I think we need a routine. And I think you have to work with your ADHD yourself. If you're an adult and it's just you or your spouse, or you have a child, we all have to work on a routine. It should be a collaborative routine. My routine, for example, has to do with meditation, walk. I have a walk. And I have goals. I don't have a strict time because I tend not to work well with that, but I have goals. So I like to do a certain amount of steps before noon. I like to do 6,000 steps before noon, which I didn't do today because I had this to prepare for. I meditate generally at noon, and then I schedule clients from 1 to 5 And if I'm not scheduling clients, I have other things that I put in place, but I have a routine. I write it down and I stick to it. And there's a whole lot of stuff. One of my routines is in the morning, while I'm waiting for my coffee to boil, I work on Italian on my Duolingo app. So I'm not allowed to drink coffee unless I've done 2 Duolingo lessons. So that's one of those things. So we don't have routine right now. So it's important for you guys as a family to discuss what your routine is. Now, Hans likes to be in his office, and his wife constantly interrupts him and wants to bring him coffee and all sorts of nice things. He doesn't like interruption.
Yep.
I prefer a little bit of interruption. I set my phone on a timer when I'm in my office trying to get writing or things done. And when that timer goes off, I'll go on my trampoline or I'll do whatever activity I have planned. But I need to mix things up because I'm kinesthetic. I need to move. I need to be physically active. So it's important that you have that you guys set a routine that works for you. It's also important, I mean, even if you're not a highly hyperactive kinesthetic person like me, it is important to find ways of exercise, because we know that regardless of whether you're an inattentive ADHDer or a hyperactive impulsive one like me, physical activity is important.
Very
get the brain
important
to keep working effectively. And we probably need to go to the next slide, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. Volgende alstublieft.
Yeah, here it is.
So this is a book, and by the way, at the end, the last slide, you can buy this book from Her Ladyship Andrea Bildrow's organization, addis/shop.com, and she has enough copies. She had the foresight to get enough copies in so she could give these people even during this pandemic. This is about a guy named Oscar Schindler, who, like one of the gentlemen who talked about how he's doing well during this time, Oscar Schindler saved 1,200 lives, Jewish people, during the Holocaust. My extensive research on him strongly suggests that he had ADHD. I've written an article on this for one of the publications there in Europe as well. But he failed in every job and business he ever had before World War II and after. Yet during World War II, he had intensity, which a lot of us are getting right now. He had an extensive support network, which I'm strongly urging a lot of you to do. And he also had a sense of mission. He had a mission, a sense of purpose. And so I argue that this period in time, it might give us a window into how we can integrate those things into our lives. And that person who actually asked that question, how do I keep that going? Well, I've devoted a whole book to that. So I would, you know, at risk of plugging my own stuff, if you get that book from Andrea, profits on that are going to Addis. And oh, by the way, in the chat, Vilio Wilding has put the full URL. Vilio, if you could put that in the Q&A, Hans will not get angry at you, and I'm wondering why you put it in the chat. Are you trying to play Let's Have an Argument with Hans? I really hope not. He said put it in the Q&A.
Oh, never mind.
So that, I'm just teasing. He knows I'm teasing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a crucial topic. You know, here we are with the intensity and the isolation. How can we create some of the positives of what we're experiencing now for the rest of our lives? Let's go to the next slide, because that's exactly what I talk about here, just to kind of, so this is what I'm sort of envisioning as my plan of action. So the first one is family stress. Now, Hans brought up this wonderful idea of nonviolent communication. And essentially, what nonviolent communication is about, it's about responding instead of reacting. And so Hans talked about the need to let a person calm down before we respond. Wonderful thing to do. I run meditation groups for people. And if you email me, we can get you in one of my meditation groups. And that meditation is a process that can help you respond versus react. One of the great opportunities of this crisis is it's a time when we can talk about issues. We have enough time, we have enough space as a family to create dialogue in an open and non-judgmental way, which again goes back to Hans's point about nonviolent communication. So one of the things that I want to point out, and that has a lot to do with our slide on the neurobiology and neurochemistry of the ADHD brain. How can we find ways to meet the neurologically driven need for intensity, as well as to make sure the inattentive folks get their solitude? Because those inattentive among us, they like their solitude, but how do we also get them socialized? How do we make sure they have contact with other people as well as exercise? So this is going to the last point that we brought out, the importance of daily routine. So one of my very important plans of action for you today is to talk through as a family routine. And you don't have to plan out every minute of the day, but find 2 or 3 goals for every day that your loved one, you and your loved one, or maybe it's just you if you're an ADHD adult, that things that you can do and accomplish every day. Very important. And I'm going to tell you, if you set goals, maybe you make a list, maybe you do what I do and put them in your phone and set an alarm to go off. That's what I have to do. When you set goals and you achieve them, it helps to drive self-esteem in a positive direction. You feel better about yourself, and feeling better about yourself helps you to regulate your emotions. It's a wonderful feedback loop to get in. So give yourself a daily routine. And even when you have a daily routine, every day find a different way to be good to yourself. Yeah. Intend to be good to yourself and set that as a goal every day. Maybe being good to yourself is you take a 30-minute walk. Maybe it's you do your Duolingo and you learn a little bit of Dutch. I would highly recommend that, by the way. Then another point that we're going to reiterate here, provide support and understanding to your loved one and get support for you. Very important. And, Hans and I have both really hit that point hard. Living with ADHD means that you often feel opposite to the rest of the world. Yep. There's an opportunity now to discover how this can have some benefits, and how perhaps if you are dealing with an ADHD loved one, how your reactions might be more effective. If they're not reactions, but responses. If you find a way to respond versus react. Volgende alstublieft.
Yeah. I want to give one thing back from my own experience to you. We are talking a lot about self-image and negative self-image, negative thoughts, and it's so valuable that you just start with being aware of your own negative self-image, because then your brain will find ways to become aware of your processes. And for example, of course, like many people with ADHD, I'm forgetful. Huge forgetful, enormous. But I'm developing, and now sometimes I do remember, I have to pick something in the kitchen. But then I walk to the kitchen, and what comes up in my mind? Oh shit, I forgot to pick it in the kitchen. No, it's not true. I'm walking to the kitchen to pick it up. But the negative thought is so rigid that it's still there while I'm doing the job I didn't forget. You see, so when I became aware of that, I realized that a negative thought is so hugely important. Start with being aware of it and make a bit distance, look at it, and then your brain will be aware of, I might try to stop with it or reframe the thought. So thank you for bringing it up. It's very important.
Well, thank you. Volgende alstublieft. And you forgot to move the slide. Just kidding. Volgende alstublieft.
Oh, I forgot it again. Oh, okay, here it is.
Okay, so apparently, her ladyship, Andrea Bilbo, Rob Pereira told me that my link for the free book is not working. I'll have to figure that out, but if you want the free ebook, go to cyberjunkie512@gmail.com, and I'll email you the link. I'll figure out what's wrong with it. I'll email. So you go there. I promise you 100% that I will send you the link. I do apologize for that. You can text me if you need to. There's my phone number. There's my website. And then here are two groups: ADHD Change the World, that's a Facebook group, and Navigating Life and Laughter with Your Unique Learner. And I'm very plugged in on helping people figure out how to succeed to their highest potential when it regards to school. So if you have any young people or you yourself are having troubles in school, it doesn't matter which country. I speak French, Spanish, and German in addition to English. I can help. And if you want to get a copy, Hans, I think you used my old slides because on the new ones I had a link. But if you want the copy of Schindler's Gift, you can get it from Addis, ADDISS-shop, SHOP.com. And it's actually in the chat. Vilio Wilding, who's a wonderful young man who works for Addis, has put it up in the chat. So if you go there, you can get a copy of that book. And if you email me at cyberjunkie512@gmail.com, you can get a copy of my book. I'll send you the link. And I apologize if the link's not working. I'm not sure what happened because it was working yesterday. I checked it.
I hope you have a few minutes left because...
Yeah, we have a few minutes left and I can take some questions. And before we do that, let me just say that this has been a pleasure, and I have enjoyed working with you, and I find, Hans, your presence to be helpful to me because you have a very positive and affirmative energy, which makes me feel good about myself, and I appreciate that. I need more people like you in my life, and I also want to express gratitude to Miriam, Marco, and Andrea, as well as Chantel for watching today, and all the folks at ADHD Europe, because it's a wonderful organization, and I have felt privileged to, in my mind, provide the ambassadorship from the United States for your wonderful organization. So let's take some questions if people have some more questions.
Sure. There are some questions left here. Someone is talking about narcissism. Also, narcissists also love to argue in a non-rational way. Is there a connection with us, ADHD, and narcissism? Or are we susceptible to be preyed on by narcissism? Well,
Narcissus is in the Greco-Roman mythology, and Narcissus fell in love with his own reflection. And so those of us who have problems with narcissism are people who did not get enough positive love reflected back at us when we were growing up. And so when you have trouble with self-esteem, one could say that that is a problem with narcissism. But some people are so wounded that it becomes an overarching problem, rising to the level of a psychological disorder.
Yep.
So it's a matter of degrees. And yes, but you see, the thing about it is that there's a payoff. When people argue, there are often a few things going on. First of all, if I have low self-esteem, I don't like to be wrong. And so that's one of the things that can be driving arguments. I don't like to be wrong because I have low self-esteem. So you're not going to make me wrong. I'm going to win the argument. That's low self-esteem. And narcissists certainly they don't like to be wrong. And then I think the second common thread is that this tendency toward creating arguments is rooted in control to some extent. If I can get you to erupt, if I can get you to lose emotional control, I have exerted control over you. And I think that this is another current that is involved because, you know, as an ADHD child, I felt that the system was exerting control over me. I used to have fantasies of militarily taking over the school, that I would have troops and I would take over the school.
Yeah.
But the reason I say that is because I think I felt overly controlled by a system that didn't understand me. So yes, I mean, I can't pronounce somebody a narcissist, but I think there are some common threads. And I think that's an excellent point to bring up.
Kevin, about this controlling and feeling over-controlled or feeling in prison. Here's a person who says, regarding daily routine for those who struggle with executive function skills, following through with goals can be difficult. Of course, we know that's ADHD. Though the structure, clear deadlines included, is set up there, teens may still spend most time on video games. We know that. Although parents and teachers check on them from time to time, check on them, yeah, such teens may still uncontrollably go back to video games without following the structure. How frequent does self-monitoring or external monitoring need to be to take effect? So,
well, first of all, I don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. And a one-size-fits-all approach is never advisable when you're dealing with ADHD because it is not a monolithic condition.
No.
It shows it, and it's a polygenic condition. So different genes are involved with different people and so forth. You got to be very careful. But I will say this. The teenage brain is not fully developed. And so especially those with ADHD struggle with impulse control when it comes to video games. And video games and technology can actually hijack the brain. So the circuitry of the brain can be hijacked to such an extent that the only thing that gives me a sense of satisfaction is when I'm engaging in my technology of choice, whether it's watching TikTok videos or playing video games, whatever it is. So when we have that involved, we have to be very careful. Now, one of the things I want to make very clear is we're in a crisis, and technology is one of the only outlets for a lot of kids. Yep. So you have to be very careful how much you manage and control it, because you could be setting yourself up for World War III in your homes. If you are having these questions, send me an email to cyberjunkie, right there on the screen, 512@gmail.com, and get my book, okay? This is not an easy question to answer, but I will give a couple easy answers that I think apply broadly. Number one, link the ability to indulge in your child's technology of choice to performing other daily goals and daily tasks. There has to be some exercise done every single day. And if there is school stuff has to be done every single day. So, link those things, and you have a variety of tools at your disposal to interdict or interrupt their access to technology. But remember, this over-reliance on technology can easily lead to mental health crises. So be very, very careful, and don't be afraid to get a mental health professional involved. And that's another area that I regularly coach families on, is this tech addiction. It's a very tricky area. And remember, whenever the neural circuitry of the brain is hijacked by by the need for a substance or by the need for a certain behavior, it can easily devolve into some very unpleasant circumstances. So be very careful when you're going about this, and get my free ebook. And if you want basically what is that ebook times 2.5, you can get a copy of Cyber Junkie from addis-shop.com.
By the way, I forgot to mention that we will promote this book on ADHD Europe Facebook, and I will talk with Chantal if we can put it on the website also.
Sure.
And we will, this webinar is recorded, and I will make an extract of it and put it on the channel, the YouTube channel of Broadcasting ADHD Europe. So, and people can send questions to me, because I will be in their email with the link they pressed on. They will find my email address, and I will pass them on to you. This looks like a very good final question to round up. Do you have any advice, Kevin, how to communicate ADHD-related problems during the pandemic to non-ADHD persons? Because if a person doesn't have ADHD, they don't understand. They only see behavior and have their opinion about it. But how can we with ADHD explain ourselves related to the pandemic to non-ADHD persons?
Well, I think that will be the topic of our next seminar, because it's a pretty broad topic. But let me provide a few pieces of information. ADHD is actually the most widely studied mental health condition. Thousands of studies show clearly that there are differences in the brains of ADHD people.
Yeah.
It also shows that the way that ADHD people process / metabolize neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine are atypical. So it's not a convenience diagnosis. It's not a junk diagnosis. It's actually the process of decades of research rooted in studies of the brain and studies of behavior. So, boy, you know, it's a really tricky thing. Beyond that, I mean, I think that, you know, I have this elevator speech that I give that the caudate nucleus is known to be involved with our ability to control our impulses. It's in the prefrontal part of the brain. And we know that numerous studies show that ADHD people have ADHD boys, we don't know in girls yet, irregularly shaped caudate nuclei. And we know that numerous gene variants associated with the caudate nucleus are common in boys with ADHD. That's just one part of the brain, and that's very specific. You know, I think it's important to just talk about those issues. And, you know, the fact that it's widely studied, the fact that.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The fact that it's widely studied, and the fact that, you know, thousands of studies show that it derives from differences in the brain. And it's just that it's ignorance of brain research that makes people second guess it, and that makes the average layperson think that he or she knows about it. You know, the problem with mental health conditions is that we all everybody loses their keys. Everybody forgets something every once in a while. Everybody feels unmotivated, but the problem, you know, with ADHD, these things are in existence in such a configuration that they provide barriers to living a successful life on a daily basis. But the problem is everybody, you know, will experience some of the symptoms that are with ADHD. And so they think, well, I lose my keys, but I used to lose my keys, but by golly, I put them in the same place every time, and I don't lose my keys anymore. You just need to learn to put your things in the proper place. Everybody has overly simplistic advice.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, it's really hard to change people's minds. I mean, there are people out there who think that, you know, the U.S. government created coronavirus so that they could control the population. How are you going to deal with people who think that?
Yeah. But I think the question, like you say, we have to round up. It might be a good idea to have another webinar one of these days about, let's say, is there an essence of ADHD and ADD? Not only because it's good that you understand it when you have ADHD, but you must have something to explain to your loved ones, your colleagues, everywhere, and you cannot give a lecture with PowerPoint, etc. when you explain to the neighbor woman or to your lead at work or your manager. So, is there a way to simply explain? But that might be something for the next webinar. So, because we are already more than 6:15 now. And
if you stay on my case, I will work on a 1-minute video that makes the case that people can use. I will make a 1-minute video.
I would like a discussion with you about it. So let's have an argument.
Oh, you know? There's not going to be
No?
a discussion.
Oh, I would like to have an argument with you and then just have a fight,
yeah,
you
let's
know?
have an argument first, then a discussion.
Now, is that something to round up? And because, of course, I can repeat, the video will be on YouTube, etc. Ask people to follow us on Twitter and on Facebook, of course. But as a roundup, let's keep on having arguments and disagree with each other, you know? That's lovely. I love it.
Well, ADHD and isolation. So you've all come here today, and because of that, you're all less isolated. And you realize that there's a poetry to this isolation, that we ADHD people in a lot of ways feel isolated from society in general. So realize that it's an opportunity to sit with that and to see how that throughout our lives may have played a role. And this might be an opportunity to move beyond that. And moving beyond isolation, I think the first step you guys have already taken by coming to this video. And the second step, this webinar, and the second step is, I want you all, my charge to you, my challenge to all of you, and to myself and to Hans, increase the number of support people in your life and increase the power of your community of support. That is the greatest lesson that you can all take away from this.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you very much, Kevin. We really love your way of talking and all your knowledge that you are sharing. So we are very grateful. And the board, almost the whole board of ADHD Europe was present also. So let's call it the day. And I hope to see you again this way or another way, maybe live face-to-face somewhere else. Thank you again. And evaluation will be sent to everybody to put in your evaluation issues. Ja, dankjewel, Kevin.
Vielen Dank, dankjewel, gracias, merci,
hasta luego, Wiederschauen.
And we must say it in Croatian. Hvala. Hvala.
Hvala. Okay, bye.
Bye, guys.